I'm curious just a little bit more about like formation wise then, because when we think about the midfield and you have Coffee and you have also Andy Sullivan in there, like I'm curious to go with two pivots because both of those players are a bit more like eights, even though they play sixes. So I think, and then if there is a more solidifying of the spine and protection there, then, you know, Crystal Dunn, we can see she's going to get up and down the field no matter what, right? She's going to join into the attack. We've seen her do that time and time again in left back position, but then it just opens up for a little bit of a different variation on how she plays if she is in that outside back position, because then you have a bit more cover in those central areas, allow for a bit more of an aggressive play. So to me, it opens up more of an interesting conversation about formation and more about spacing and how you create overloads regardless of where everyone's playing. I just think it'd be an interesting aspect to try in this window, some movement in terms of keeping the same personnel, obviously, that they have, and how do you adjust where that personnel is playing.
So you want to see a double pivot perhaps between those two?
Yeah, I would definitely. I think that locks that down. I think then you have a variation. I mean, I wouldn't even be opposed to seeing a Rose Lavelle playing at the 9 sometimes, because she's going to drop deep. She played there in Man City when she was there. Like, this isn't like foreign like concept.
She would almost play similar to how Kat Macario plays in that.
Exactly. I mean, obviously they're different players, but when Kat will, I think most people can agree, and she's healthy, that's her position. I mean, what she brings to the game of soccer in general is we don't see very often, right? But like with her being out, then depending on your opponent, there's options to go elsewhere within this personnel. And so I think for me, it's like less about really about the personnel. It's like, how do you move players around? How does it give the team a different look? Because Vlatko, in one aspect, has been really consistent with how he's been calling people in. I mean, he said it, and then it hasn't changed, right? This has been like pretty consistent with the way that he has put together these rosters and stuff. So,
well, so I have to ask you about Kristie Mewis now, because we saw her in the 6. Is she going to be part of that pivot?
I mean, she could. I mean, I mean, I haven't thought that far, right? I was more thinking about
Lori. You're like assistant coach. You're our attacking third USWNT coach. Let's go.
Okay, everybody, let me put my coaching hat on. I think ultimately Mewis is going to be better as a higher up player. I think that she can play the final pass. But listen, I think when you're playing two pivots and there's a real understanding of the role, she can play in there with somebody else. I wouldn't put her as the lone 6. I just don't think that brings out her best qualities or the way that the U.S. Women's National Team wants to play. And I think we've seen that kind of across the board for a lot of people outside of a Julie Ertz in that regard. So if that's the case, she can play one of those double pivots, and then you allow – I mean, we saw that at Houston. This isn't – she dropped deep. I've said this time and time ago. She can drop deep and playmate from that role, and then you just share the responsibilities of the build-out and getting into the attack. So,
I mean, there's endless options and opportunities for these players, and we will never know until it happens and we see it on the pitch.
But I also wonder, at what point do we switch, systems, and do we go to a double pivot? Why is that not something that is being considered?
We were just saying, we had spoke about that too. I was saying that exact same thing. Like, I think the real, for me, it's more of like less about the personnel, because we're seeing some consistency in that now with Vlatko, and it's more about formation change, right? Like how do you utilize and get the best out of this group? And I think we've seen, personally, for me, utilizing just a single pivot with this group and this mix of players, it leaves us way too exposed in the spine of the midfield. And I think we even saw that glimpses during the CONCACAF Championship against Canada. I think if they had opportunities to put some in the back of the net, Fleming had tons of space on the outside of Andy at times. And so I also think it suits Andy and Coffee, if maybe that you potentially play them together. What does that look like? Because reality is they're both more of a number 8s than they are true 6s. So I think you share that role. And then and I was telling Sandra and Lisa, then it puts players like Sophia Smith and Mal Pugh and whoever you're playing as the number 9. I know I even mentioned about Rose Lavelle as the number 9, myself, and you and I have talked about that before, Al, but whoever, and maybe Sanchez is the 10, right? Depending on what it looks like, it puts those players in better positions. And then when you want to attack with your outside backs, you have more of an anchor centrally. And I just don't think, I think that has been my biggest concern when we are in possession. And then once we do lose it, is being exposed. And Nigeria can expose it for sure. And also in front of 90,000 fans that come Wembley, they will expose it as well. So
I mean, we're going to be up against it. I think you're spot on, and you do solve for that if you do switch to double pivot and utilize Rose Lavelle similarly the way that. I mean, again, he wanted to build his squad around Kat Macario as that 9. Well, guess what? Rose Lavelle is going to be the closer possibility to that than Alex Morgan, than Ashley Hatch, than a Trinity Rodman. So I think that gets you further down the path in terms of the team being able to understand the principles of play. But I also think, why are we so set on, as much as we're talking about consistency and lineup and personnel, why are we so set on a 4-3-3?
Yeah.
I mean, this is modern football. This team should be able to flex in and out of different systems. I mean, I love what Potter's been doing at Kansas City, for instance. And most of these players now are well-versed in a 3-back, or well-versed in a 4-back that then flexes into a different look in the attacking half and their principle of play that way. So I don't understand why we're not considering different formations based on our opponent and getting these. It feels, my only fear, not only fear, but my biggest hesitation with the evolution of this group is that it's becoming too robotic, and that, and yes, you have to understand space and you have to understand time. And if you can understand those things, then the fluidity evolves differently. If you're telling people just to make sure that they're picking up or getting into the space at this moment in time, it's not what I think some of our players are, or it's limiting some of the creativity of some of our attacking talent that we have. So I just think that more fluidity, different systems. Again, I know that goes against our theory of more consistency with the lineup, but I think that would help this groove evolve. And to answer another question for you, I want to see Girma get more time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we will see Girma. I don't know. For some reason, I do feel like, I mean, she's been playing so well, and I think getting her into this mix a bit more often, we'll see that time come. I think it's interesting too, and then we can move on. But like with the formation, or move into a hybrid, right? Like even if you start and if your formation is like a 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1, what does that look like when you're in possession? Because you can easily move in and out of a 3-back. And we talk about Crystal Dunn in particular because she's joining back into the mix as a training player, but she's a player that we always talk about, where's her best position? Well, it does sound like, and going off of what Vlatko has done in the past and what Jill Ellis did, she'll probably most likely be in that outside back, as much as anybody wants to see her in the midfield, right? But then you can utilize.
Wait. Do you want to see her in the midfield?
I think with Crystal on this squad, she's going to be most utilized and best utilized as an outside back.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Good.
For sure.
I'm glad we aligned on that.
I'm not lying that I don't dislike her. I mean, I really like her.
I want to see her in the midfield.
You do?
I want to see Crystal Dunn in the midfield.
Who?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Over who? Because you have Sanchez, you have Rose Lavelle, and Macario if she's back. We've
already decided we're throwing Rose at the 9. We're going to put Sanchez in the 10. This opens up a spot in the back.
Window of games to do it, right? I mean, if we're talking about like switching it up, like why not? But
we have Emily Fox
she's only
in the back
line. Player.
Yes, we have Emily Fox in the back line at this point. Like, I think that the back line is okay without Dunn. And if Vlatko Andonovski can utilize the skill set that Crystal Dunn can provide, she's taken, I mean, what feels like 3 months only during her pregnancy and since giving birth off. This is a chance to maybe bring her in as a new role, and with some of these younger players on this roster, shake things up a little bit. I don't see why not.
Yeah. Anyway,
hybrid
formations, get people moving. And I think you can utilize different formations within the game, depending, instead of just having specific structure that you're going with, right? And then that puts people in different positions to still bring out the best. So
we've got the personnel to do a 3-5-2 with wing backs, so it kind of solves for it. You've got Dunn, you've got Foxy.
Yep.
I think Sophia Smith, Pugh can play in a 2 front. Rodman can play in a 2 front. Obviously, Alex Morgan can. That's where she thrived almost. Probably the best in her career up to this point, minus this year. She's been fantastic.